Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the call, the webinar. Maybe we'll have a few more join us as we move along, but we want to get started and be conscious of your time. I do want to let you all know that we are recording today's session so that 4Gen Now can put it on the website and replay it. So just be aware of that. But we do, throughout the presentation, we encourage you to ask questions. I do have a place at the end of the presentation to allow for more questions. But let's make this as interactive as possible. Just interrupt, ask questions. There is a chat feature. You can also use that. I am admittedly not real good about continually checking the chat, so you may type a message and I may not see it for some period of time, but a couple of people are on that are keeping an eye out for that and will let me know if anything needs to be brought to my attention. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn my webcam off. I only turned it on just momentarily so that you can see there actually is a human being on the other end here. And otherwise, we'll just focus on the slides themselves and the audio. So let me do that here real quick, and then we'll get things going. All right, so to begin, let me just ask, can everyone see a screen that says the webinar will begin momentarily? Yes, no? Can anyone? Yes, yes. Okay, we got a couple messages in the chat. Okay, great. And feel free to use your audio. It's appreciated that you're muted while I'm talking. But if you've got anything to say, just unmute and let's have some dialogue as we move along here. Okay, so again, the title of this presentation or webinar is How to Know in 90 Days If Your Startup is Viable. And it's brought to you by Jim Sugarman and the folks at 4Gen Now. And I actually represent a business called Plan Canvas. I'm the founder of Plan Canvas. And I always like to start every presentation with this little quote that it doesn't matter how you define success, but it's critical that you do. And you'll see that as a theme throughout this webinar as well. All right, first, just a little bit about myself and my credentials, why I may be qualified to actually give this webinar. So I've really kind of played four major roles over the last several years that gave me some startup or startup-like experience, starting with my role as a corporate executive. And even though, I didn't own the company, I was hired to lead a business that had been acquired. It was a standalone entity. And I got to, I've got somebody said expand my screen. Let me see if I can blow things up a little bit before we go any further. Is that any better? Do I need to blow it up any more? Okay, it says we're good. All right. So I was hired to lead this company that was a standalone entity. So I got to treat it as though it was my own. And even though it wasn't a startup, I came in really with a bit of a startup mentality. That business was at about 21 million in annual revenue, and we put a plan in place to grow it, and eventually grew it to well over $80 million in revenue. And the primary method for doing so was to develop new products and services. So it was an existing company, but we took a startup frame of mind and created new products and services because we were serving some flat, very mature markets, and we needed to do some things to disrupt those markets. I also have worked and continue to work as a freelancer, an independent business consultant, and I started up that freelance service or business. And a lot of times we don't think of freelancing as a business, but you are an entrepreneur if you're starting a freelance business because it has all the same markings of a business, right? But I started that up based on experience and relationships that I had in various industries. And I chose an approach where I diversified the things that I was doing. So I didn't just focus on one single thing. I tried to open up as many doors as possible by having a diverse set of services without going too crazy and offering too many things. All right, I've been doing that for about 4.5 years successfully. Through that role, it led me to another role. So I kind of play a dual or triple, wear multiple hats. One of the hats that I wear is as the COO of a small to medium sized business or SMB. And I was led to this business actually through my independent business consulting to help the owner take what had been a one-person freelance business model and grow it into a company that I put in quotes national. It's not quite national, but it stretches from Texas to South Carolina. So certainly covers many regions of the United States. But I was brought in to help him do that, to help him put the strategies together and the business plans in place, and then to actually begin to execute those. And as that relationship moved on, he asked me to contract into the role of COO for this newly found business. The thing about this was that it was a proven business model that he wanted to grow into a company or a business. And it was a unique or very rare type of service, right? Next, then, as the founder of Plan Canvas, I founded Plan Canvas really based on a book that I wrote called Business is Art. The book was written based on my experience over in the left-hand corner as a corporate exec and growing that business. But from that, we developed a software as a service called Plan Canvas. And we tested it through several months of beta testing with users, and then ultimately released it out to make it publicly available. And it is actually something that resides now in an emerging market. So Plan Canvas is really all about not just planning your business, but strategically managing your business and executing to those plans. And that represents kind of a new set of tools in an emerging market of strategy to execution management. So I highlighted several words on this particular screen because you're going to see them occur again throughout the webinar. New, experience, relationships, diversified, proven, unique, experience, tested, emerging market. Those are just some of the things that will be covered at least briefly throughout this webinar. And I wanted to highlight them here. So there's a little bit about me, probably more than you wanted to know, but a little bit of background of why I'm giving this presentation. So throughout the webinar, what we're effectively going to do is ask questions, or have you ask questions of yourself. So there are three broad categories of these questions that we're going to be covering. There are questions with regard to you yourself. There are questions with regard to your market. And there are questions with regard to your business model. So those are the types of questions that we're going to be covering as we go through today's webinar. All right, I'm just going to pause real briefly to make sure that I have indeed hit the record button and make sure that we're good to go there. So while I'm doing that, do we have any questions just to begin? Nope. Somebody might be coming in with a question. We'll give it just a second to see if they are. No. Okay. All right. So let's begin then. So the first question that you want to ask, and I realize some of this is not going to be news to you, but we kind of forget this stuff unless we have it right in front of us. But the first question you're going to want to ask yourself is, what type of entrepreneur are you? Right? There are all kinds of types of entrepreneur, and there's no good, bad, or indifferent type that you can be. But here are some of the most common types of entrepreneur. Right? There's the thrill seeker, what I call the thrill seeker. This is the person whose primary purpose in starting up a business is to go public, to get to that IPO and sort of that get rich overnight quick scheme. I put that in quotes because there's no such thing as overnight. I heard funny thing one person told me was that they were in the 7th year of being an overnight success. And I think that's fairly common. You know, it takes a while to build up some traction for most businesses. There are some exceptions, but most of the time you've really got to put some time into it. Then there's the lifestyle entrepreneur. This is somebody that has a passion for something that they're doing, or they just don't want to work for someone else, or want a little bit more freedom in their schedule. But it's more about the lifestyle than anything else. There's another category that I call the mother of invention. So this is somebody that just really doesn't have any choice. They don't have any income, or they're unemployed or underemployed, and they've got to do something. So they start some kind of business for themselves just to be able to put some food on the table and pay a few bills. There's also the social entrepreneur. So this is somebody who starts a business that is really geared toward solving social ills or creating social opportunity, or perhaps a big part of their business model is giving back to society or to the world or to the neighborhood or community in some form or fashion. And then finally, fairly new kind of concept is the spiritual entrepreneur. So this is an entrepreneur that begins a business really kind of as a means to express, promote, or celebrate their spirituality. And that could be religion. It might not be. It could be something else. But however they define spirituality. So that type of entrepreneur is really putting a business together with that type of specific focus in mind. So you need to ask yourself, what type of entrepreneur are you? Because some of the actions that you'll take are going to be dramatically different depending on the type that you are. Now, you may have characteristics of many or all, even all of these types, but there should be one that's kind of central to who you are. All right, so we had a question on the chat board: will the slides be available to the webinar? And Jim Sugarman answered yes, they will be. So thank you for the question, appreciate that. And Jim, thank you for answering it. All right, let's move on from what type of entrepreneur are you to, well, why the heck are you here in the first place? Right? For any business, especially if you're really just starting out, you need to step back and say, what is my vision? How do I see things kind of ideally out into the future, right? You also need to think about, well, what really is my mission? Now, I separate mission and purpose here, and a lot of times you see it really kind of combined. But mission, to me, is really what you do. It's what you do. So vision is how you see it out into the future, and mission is what you do. Purpose is why you do it. All right, it's the driving force behind why is that your vision? Why is that your mission? Why are you here? Why are you doing what you're doing? Now, it's important to identify those things as foundational work for your business or business idea, but you also need to really think about those things on your personal side, your personal life. And the importance here is that those two things have to really align. They have to be in harmony. I don't use the term work-life balance at all anymore, because I think it's kind of a unicorn. It's very hard to find. And in some cases, it's kind of hard to define as well, because especially for entrepreneurs, there's not a lot of distinction between your business life and your personal life. So balance is something that's pretty tough to achieve or even define. But you can certainly ask yourself if what you see for your business is in harmony with what you see for yourself. All right. Okay. Now, some more important questions to ask about yourself. And the big one is, how determined are you? How determined are you to get this business idea off the ground? Or once it's off the ground, how determined are you to see it through? There's a lot of questions that lie underneath this, because at the core, entrepreneurship is hard. It's tough. So you've got to think about things like, how much money do I have in the bank, or how much access to capital do I have, and for what period of time? Because make no mistake about it, there's going to be a period where you aren't bringing in as much revenue as you'd like, and where you're spending more in startup costs than you would like. So you're going to need to define some financial runway for yourself. How much, that's really up to you and the business that you are launching. In my case, when I went into freelance independent business consulting work, I gave myself a 6-month window. So I had an initial 6 months where I could have gone without receiving any kind of payment from any client. And I felt like that was sufficient for that type of business. But it's going to be different for everyone. So you need to think about that. You need to think about how far in debt you're willing to go with this business. Just a quick word of caution here, a word of advice. Don't necessarily rule out loans. A lot of people don't want any business loans, don't want that burden, and will seek other ways of gaining capital. And that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But I will say that over the long haul, it's much less expensive to get a commercial loan than it is to bring in an investor, because the investor is going to want a chunk of your business. They're going to have some control over how you run your business. They're going to want their money back. There's a whole lot that goes into seeking investors that simply don't apply with a bank loan. Bank loan, all they want is for you to pay them back with some interest. And there's also kind of a separation in the depth of belief that a given party has actually in your business idea. An investor is taking a gamble, thinks, well, this might work. Let's see if it does. But they're banking on multiple ventures not working in exchange for that one that really works well. Whereas a bank, if they offer you a loan, it's because they truly do believe in your business. They believe you're going to have the means to pay it back. And that's saying something, right? It's more validation that not only you, but someone else really believes in your business. All right. So a lot of other questions that you need to ask yourself here. How many hours can you realistically spend in this business? Because you may need a day job or other source of income while you are launching a business. How secure are you in your relationships, and how much do you care? Entrepreneurship is hard on relationships. So if you are in a romantic relationship, your partner needs to understand that you are going to be spending an absorbent amount of time at times in your business and not with your partner. And is that okay? So these are things that you need to talk through. Same thing with friends and family. You're going to see less of your friends. You're going to see less of your family as you're beginning this business, and probably well beyond that. So just have that in mind, and make sure that everyone else knows it as well, and get your support system comfortable with it. All right. Let's go on to the next. All right. And again, feel free to just jump in if you have anything to add or any questions to ask. Just jump in. All right. Some more questions to ask now. This time about your business or your product. The primary question really is there a market? Is there a market? Does what you're providing fill a need? Does it solve a problem? Does anybody want it? If they do, how much are they going to be willing to pay for it? All of those types of questions have to be answered, but the overarching question is there a market for what you're doing? And here's where you see some of those words reappearing that I showed on the very first screen introducing myself. Is it new? Is it unique? Is it different? Do you have relationships to make this work? Is it an emerging market? Is it saturated? Do you have experience in it? Is this thing proven and tested? And there's no one right answer for any one of those types of questions, but collectively, you have to bring them all together in order to ultimately get to this point. Is there a market? All right. So now you've determined that there's a market. Fantastic. Can you get to it? Is it accessible, not just to anyone, but to you and your business specifically? So in part, to answer that question, you have to ask a couple of sub-questions. You have to ask, have you defined and quantified the market? It's a fallacy to say to anyone, when asked, who's your customer, who's your target? And you say, everyone is a potential customer. That's a wrong answer. So you need to think of it in more finite terms. Who really is your ideal customer? What's really your market? What are you really going to expend your resources on in order to reach that particular market? Then you've got to ask some other questions. Are there any barriers to the market? Things like regulatory or laws, certifications, any protections out there? Like, are you under a non-compete clause that will preclude you from starting up this business? You've got to look at all of those things, and you need to look out also at, is there a high cost to entering into this market? So you may know exactly who you are, why you're doing this. You may have identified the exact target market that you want to go after, but if you've got no way to get to that market, it's not a viable business, right? You've got to have a way to access the market. So ask yourself those critical questions. All right, so now you've proven there's a market, you feel confident you can access it. Now what? Well, some more questions to ask. And one of the big ones is, do you have a go-to-market strategy? And I'm talking about a strategy that's not just in your head. Right? I'm talking about a formal strategy. It doesn't have to be in-depth and massively detailed, but you should write this stuff out. Do you have influencers? Where are you going to sell this product? Through what channels, as well as promote it? All right, who's going to sell it? How are you going to collect the money once you get some sales? And how are you going to support your clients, customers, etc., not only through the sales process, but once they've actually made the purchase of your product or service? How are you going to support them or it? So these are some of the types of questions you need to consider when you're putting your go-to-market strategy together. If you don't have a go-to-market strategy, your business idea is not very viable. Okay. All right. You also have to ask some questions about your organization. All right. You have to overall, what you're really looking to answer is who's capable and willing of doing what. Because chances are pretty good you can't do this by yourself, no matter what it is that you're looking to do. You're going to need a little bit of help, be they actual employees or people that you're bringing on with the promise of sharing in some profits later, or if they're just people that you know who are willing to help you out, or maybe they're just hired guns that you bring in to help you do some things. But one of the first things you have to decide is really what does need to be done. And I'm talking about, listing these things out. Again, not keeping it in your head, but defining what you need to do in order to not just get to a launch, but to actually run the business post-launch. So have you defined the skills that are going to be required to run those tasks? And have you identified the people that have those skills that are willing to do it? Other questions: how experienced are they? How committed are they? Why are they here? You want to know that. Why are they on board with you? And do they know what they're supposed to do? That is a really big, important point. Do they know what they're supposed to do? Too often we just assume that because everyone's sitting in the team meeting or has received your email or phone call or whatever, that they know exactly what to do. Jane is the welder. She knows she needs to weld. All right. Jane might not know what she's supposed to weld at what time and when to have it done and those sorts of things. So you need to make sure that the people that are working with you, no matter how skilled and experienced they are, they have to know exactly what's expected of them. All right. What about passion? Of course, passion is in here. And Gary, I'm going to flip back a couple of slides, right? Right here. Why are you here? This whole area of purpose, that's where your passion lies. Your why are you doing it? Your big why. I apologize for not pointing that out specifically as passion, but passion is certainly embedded in this. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So you're welcome. Okay. Look at me reading the chats. Wow. I did not anticipate I'd be that quick. Click on it. All right, so let's move on. Another question you need to ask yourself is all about your infrastructure. A lot of businesses, or entrepreneurs think about starting something up. They got a great idea, but where are you going to do this? Do you have physical work space requirements? If so, what are they? Where are you going to put it? Do you have distribution needs? How are you going to handle that? How about equipment? And technology. Planning and management tools. I can't emphasize this enough, in part because I'm in the business of providing planning and management tools, business planning and management tools. But there are lots of other options out there as well. And it's really critical that you utilize something, whether you create it yourself or go out and purchase something or bring in a consultant or whatever. Make sure you've got some planning and management tools for your business, all right, and practices. Practices are more important than the tools themselves. All right, how about financial tools? How about customer relationship management tools? Do you need them? All right, there are all kinds of, there are free options for CRM tools. There are subscription based options out there. So all kinds of options. You can even just use Excel if that's what's going to be most comfortable, but use something that's going to help you maintain those relationships with your customers. All right, how about project management? So some of you may be looking at business or business idea that's really project based, right? That's really, construction company as an example. Building a new structure or house, that's a project, has a start date, has a targeted end date, and the whole thing is a project. Or maybe you're a website designer, developer, right? Building that website for your client, that's a project. So any type of business that is dependent on delivering projects to your clients and customers, you really need to have some project management tools in place. Certainly project management practices, preferably some actual tools in place. Right? And again, all kinds of options out there, but make sure you're doing something to manage those projects. Do you have a website? Do you have social media? Those sorts of things sometimes get overlooked. I include them as infrastructure. They might be categorized elsewhere just as well, but I look at it as part of your business, right? And so to me, it's infrastructure. But make sure you have those things. Everybody needs to have them, even if you're dependent uh, largely on other marketing networks or means of marketing, website, social media presence. If nothing else, it gives some credibility to what you're doing, and it's a place where you can put testimonials from other customers and clients. Right, so make sure you have those things. Doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be expensive, but you should have something. All right, how about your support structure? You can't do this stuff alone. You just can't. So do you have a support network? And other than that big red question on this slide, probably the most important question is that last one in the list. Are you willing to listen? It is, hey, you are good at what you do, and you've got a lot of drive. You're smart. If you didn't have all of those things, you wouldn't be looking at going into business, right? So our tendency as leaders is to just start running. We put our heads down and we run, right? You got to slow down a little bit and be willing to listen to others, listen to coaches, mentors, advisory boards. If you are in startup mode, you really ought to think about putting together an advisory board. So that advisory board doesn't have, they don't hold a club over you, right? They don't have a vested monetary interest or financial interest in your business. They just have a vested interest in you. Maybe you pay them a little bit, maybe not, but they're folks that have been around. They've done some things. They've got some good advice that they can lend you. So put together an advisory board and treat it like that. Treat it like a board. And as opposed to individual mentors. So some word of advice there. Think about the relationships that you have with others, with peers, providers, prospects, all of those sorts of things. So answer those questions. If you don't have sufficient answers for any of these things, start doing something about it, because you definitely want to have a support network. All right, important questions to ask about your pitch. Some of you have probably watched Shark Tank. I watch it. Shark Tank is not a great example of what a pitch really looks like in front of an investor, because there's entertainment factors going on. The sharks themselves are in competition with one another, vying for the entrepreneur's love and interest, or vying for camera time or whatever. They can be pretty brutal. Again, kind of for entertainment purposes. So it's not real world, but it hopefully is one of the worst case scenarios you could think of in terms of pitching your business ideas, right? Because if they're going to rip you to shreds, they're going to rip you to shreds like that. So ask yourself this question: could you pitch it? Could you pitch it on Shark Tank? Could you pitch it to typical normal type investors? All right. So this includes things like elevator pitch, long-term strategic plan, short-term tactical business plan. That's the documentation of any assumptions and risk mitigations against that risk. Can't stress that enough, right? So, what's the risk? What's the likelihood of it occurring? What are you going to do about it, either to avoid its occurrence or to minimize its impact once it does occur? So those are some of the types of things that are included in a risk mitigation plan. But think through these things. Don't keep them in your head. Get them written down in some form or fashion so that you can begin to make sense of it, and so that others can see it and get on board with it. All right, so important question to ask. Could I pitch this? Even if I'm not looking for investors, could I pitch it to potential investors? And this is a big, big, big word of caution for you. If you ignore this stuff, the stuff that's on this slide, your business is twice as likely to fail. Think about that. So any business startup is already at lower odds of succeeding just because it's a startup, right? The failure rate is unacceptably high in startups. But if you don't do the stuff that's included on this screen, if you couldn't pitch it to an investor, you are twice as likely to fail. So why increase the odds of failure when the odds are already stacked against you? Do something to turn that tide and put the odds more in your favor. All right, so do this stuff, please. All right, so in summary, I've presented really 10 broad questions, and we put them in 3 categories that you need to ask yourself in order to ultimately answer the question, do I have a viable business or business idea or even product idea? So first questions are categorized as under, well, the categories are you, your market, and your business model, right? And the questions to ask yourself about yourself is, what type of entrepreneur are you? Are business and personal vision, mission, and purpose in harmony? They need to be. If they're out of sync, you've got big troubles. And one of the things that we don't think about in terms of that particular question is that you are really prone to coming across as being insincere. If your business and your personal vision, mission, purpose are not in harmony or aligned with one another, you're going to be insincere in one of those aspects, if not both, and it's going to be evident and it's going to hurt you either in your personal life or in your business life. Right? So insincerity is a big killer. How dedicated are you? You've got to really think that through, because this is not going to be the easiest thing you've ever done in your life. It's going to be one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life. So how dedicated are you to this idea? Questions about your market. Is there one? And if so, can you get to it? If you can't, then you don't have a viable business model, no matter how great the idea. It may be a great business idea or viable idea for someone else that can access that market, but if you can't, it's not viable, right? Do you have a go-to-market strategy? And then the questions about your business model: who's capable of doing what? Do you have the infrastructure? Do you have the support network? Importantly, related to that is, are you willing to listen to the folks that are in that support network? And then finally, can you pitch this whole thing to investors? Even if you're not looking for them, could you do it? All right. And as Gary pointed out, kind of across all of this in big capital letters is passion. And all of these things kind of tie to that. How passionate are you about this? It's important that you have some amount of passion. And hopefully that's a great amount of passion. All right, so those are the questions that you want to ask. Again, kind of failing on any of these questions is an indicator that perhaps my business idea is not viable. All right, but if you can successfully go through these questions and answer them, then chances are much better that you do indeed have a viable business idea. There's no guarantee, but at least, like I said, it begins putting things back in your favor, because the odds are stacked against you right from the get-go, and you want to do what you can to mitigate against that. All right, risk mitigation. All right, so finally, we went all through this. We never even mentioned anything about 90 days, and the title of this presentation is how to know in 90 days if your business idea is viable. All right, so let me just say to that, I don't really care about 90 days. Right, that was kind of just a tricky way to get you on board here and think about things. 90 days, hey, that might be a perfect time frame for you and your business idea. But you shouldn't let anyone other than yourself tell you what the time frame is, what the right time frame is. You may look at something and, well, let me give you a personal example. So when I was looking at that small business where I'm contracted as the COO, I looked at the business model and knew instantly it was a viable thing. Right? My own business of PlanCanvas, I'm a year and a half in. I think it's a viable business, but I still don't absolutely know for sure that it is. I'm still exploring a lot of that, right? And there's nothing to say that's good, bad, or indifferent. It just is the way it is. It just depends on the business that you have, or the business idea that you have. So time frames are meaningless except to you. Pick a time frame for yourself if you'd like, because you don't want to chase after a bad idea forever. But there's nothing magical about 90 days. So if that doesn't apply to you, it doesn't apply to you. All right. Lastly, we want to open it up for any questions. We've scheduled 45 minutes for this presentation. I'm perfectly willing to hang on a little bit longer if need be, but we've got about 8 or 9 minutes to entertain questions and just kind of talk a little bit if so desired. But before we do, I want to invite you out to PlanCanvas go to this site, plancanvasapp.net, and there for free you can begin using the personal plan that's built within Plan Canvas. So you can focus on you and the things that you do in that personal plan, or talk about your vision, mission, purpose, your strengths and your blind spots, what you want to achieve in multiple categories, including your career, your current job, your personal and family life, and optionally your spiritual life. And then what are you going to do about it? So, recording of action items that you're going to take in order to get there. So, that is free to you. It's free to anybody. So, if you get out there, take a look at it, and you like it, please refer others to it, because you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You don't have to be a business owner. You don't have to be an organizational leader to focus on a personal plan. Anybody can, and everybody can benefit from using a personal plan. So the more that are out there using it, the better. All right, so I'm going to just pop that window open here just real quick so that you know what it looks like and know that you're looking at the right place. Let me do that here. So there's the web page, plancanvasapp.net. Click on this Plan Canvas for individuals. All right, that is the free version of Plan Canvas. There's also a subscription base for small business. So if you want to do any of the other stuff that I was talking about, particularly getting ready for that pitch, that's what you can do in here, but it is subscription based. All right, so I hope you get out there. I hope you do that stuff, and I hope that you do make the decision to launch your businesses, and that you feel like they're viable. I hope these questions help you. And with that, let's just see if we've got anyone that would like to jump in, ask any questions, make any comments. Feedback is welcome as well. Nothing, no one, anyone there?
John, this is Jim. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it.
I'm barely hearing you. I don't know if anyone else can hear you.
Let's see.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, let me just crank up my volume and make sure it's not me. Oh, it is me. Sorry about that. Go ahead. Go ahead. I can hear you now.
John, Chris has a question, if you can see it in the chat box, but can you explain the business version of Plan Canvas? What options are there?
Sure. Just real quickly, and Chris or anybody else, you're welcome to reach out to me. Let me type my email address right here so you can find me easily. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, a number of ways you can reach out to me. But happy to have a more in-depth conversation about it. But effectively, the difference is, I think I kind of explained what's in the individual, the personal plan side of the house. It's where you're really focusing on you, not so much the business, you, the individual. So what do you want to get out of life, and in what kinds of time frames? And what are you going to do about it? By the way, I didn't mention that I really highly encourage you to use a coach when you are working with a personal plan. It doesn't have to be a hired coach, paid coach, but you should have a coach, somebody that is emotionally kind of detached from it and really just wants to see you do well. So review that personal plan on a monthly basis. Over on the business side, you do things like you just describe your business. Start out by just talking about what it is that you have. What's your vision, mission, purpose? What are the markets? A lot of the things that are just in these slides. What are your markets? What are your products? What's important to you? What does success mean to you in this business? So what types of things are you going to measure against? Success is measured in many ways beyond revenue and profit, right? So what are some of the other things that would make for a successful business in your eyes, for you? You lay out a longer term strategy for your business. So if you have a vision, then getting in the way of your vision is this nasty little thing called reality. Right? So the purpose of a strategic plan is to, over a long haul, close the gap between reality and your vision. And so there you're talking about your long-term goals and objectives, any internal strategic initiatives. These are projects that you've got to take on or undertake that cost you time and money, but help enable your business or enable the achievement of your goals and objectives. So those are some of the kinds of things that are on the strategic plan. That's in the SMB version of Plan Canvas. There's also that 12-month business plan where you're looking at your sales and marketing plan, your operational plan, your staffing plan, and your financial plan, identifying what it is that you want to do, what you're going to measure. You can log action items and assign them, and those action items can be assigned to anybody using the software or not. And everyone that is on the receiving end of anything will receive emails that say, "Hey, Joe Smith was just assigned this action item," etc. And then finally, there's also an area for you to track at a high level your client projects or orders that you're putting together for a client. So what is it? Who is the client? How much revenue is associated with it? What are the major milestones and how much revenue is associated with each milestone? And then what's kind of the overall health of the project and each of those milestones? So that type of information can be tracked in there as well. So I talked through that very fast. I apologize, but hopefully I covered it.
John, Jessica has a question, if you can see in the chat box, but is there a market for your business idea? A little bit more on that. Any recommendations on resources or strategies to do some of the market testing?
Yes, thank you, Jessica. I actually failed to talk a little bit more about that when I was on the "Is there a market" slide. All right, a big key is right here in the center. That's why I put it in the center. Oops, I need to pop back to the presentation. Sorry. Okay, can you see the presentation now? Okay, I'm going to assume you can. So right here, proven and tested. All right, so I'll use myself as an example with Plan Canvas. All right, Plan Canvas was a product idea that was spawned out of experience. I had used the process without having a software to use it and had successfully used it. Beginning with growing that business unit to 80 million plus. All right, so I knew that the process worked. I used that process also in my consulting practice, but I still didn't know if the software would work. So we built it, and then we ran several months of beta tests. We had about 3 dozen folks sign up to be beta testers, and we ran that beta test for a period of time. So those were some of the specific things that I did to test out Plan Canvas. You're going to want to do the same with whatever business or product you have. You need to test it in some form or fashion. Software testing is very different than other types of products, right? But you want to test them out. You can do things like giveaways, right? For a while, you're just giving the thing out and formally soliciting feedback from whoever received that product or service, taking that feedback, tweaking the product, tweaking your messaging, those sorts of things. So you definitely want to do that sort of, you want to go through those sorts of exercises before you dive in too deeply. There's no one great answer because every product and service is different. The markets are different. But those are just generically some of the types of things you want to do. You want to test it out. How you get to that test is kind of up to you, but those are just a couple of ideas. Does that help?
Okay, thank you. Yes, Chris has a question, comment or two. Finding it about work-life choices.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just overall commentary.
Yeah.
This can also be. Okay, you're reading it too. Okay.
I am reading. Yes, thank you, and thank you, Krista, for those comments. Yeah, it's I cannot emphasize enough the whole bit about making sure that your business and your personal lives are in harmony or are aligned, at least complementary. They don't have to be in balance because they're not going to be. But those other things are really important. You can't be happy in one if you're not happy in the other, because like I said, the line is so gray and blurred at times that it's really hard to separate them. And back in terms of, let's see, what else did Krista say? Case can also be made in the form of keeping abreast of the trade magazines that cater to your business. Absolutely, absolutely. Be cognizant of the industry that you're going into. In fact, when you are putting your ideas together, you're going to want to do some competitive analysis, and you're going to want to do some comparative analysis. So, that comes from the industry. So there may be businesses out there in that industry that aren't your competitors. Maybe there's geographical boundaries that keep them from being. So you're going to want to study those folks. You're going to want to talk to them, expand your network, and get to know those folks. Learn as much as you can about the industry. It doesn't mean emulate what everyone else is doing, because probably part of the reason you're going into business is because you've got a better idea, or think you've got a better idea, or a better way of doing something. So don't do that analysis to just emulate what everyone else is doing. Do it to understand what they're doing and think about what's not working and focus there. It's a great point, Krista. Thank you. What else? Jim, from my experience, a great way to test the market is to ask prospects to buy your product or service. Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate test, right? Is anybody buying it? I think there are some things to do prior to getting it out there that's going to give you a pretty good indication of whether anyone's going to want it. There's a saying out there, and that goes something like this: fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. So too many times, especially inventors and entrepreneurs, we fall in love with our idea, and it's a great idea. Everybody ought to see this as a great idea, right? So I don't really need to ask them if it is or not, because I know it is. And that's often when we fail and fall. So let's get out there in front and really confirm that the idea that we think we have actually is something that anybody would be interested in. Steve says, I've done a ton of market research globally at reddit.com as another resource. Great point, Steve. All kinds of sources out there, but do your homework. Make sure you do your homework.
John, that's an awesome quote, man. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. I've not heard that. I might be the only one that hadn't, but that's a great reminder.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, because we all can be guilty of that. All right. Anything else? All right. Well, listen, thank you, Steve. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. I hope it was at least a little bit helpful. And please do feel free to reach out to me. Based on feedback from this, we may run this again sometime in the not too distant future through 4Gen Now. If you feel there was value, if it was a big waste of time, we'd like to know that, honestly, because we don't want to waste our time or anyone else's. So that feedback is very, very much appreciated. So please do reach out to Jim or to me or to both of us and let us know what you think. And we'd appreciate it. And I'm sure Jim would also like to know what additional webinars would you be interested in if he's able to arrange them through 4Gen Now. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. And before closing, Jim, anything else that you would like to close with?
Just want to thank you, John. Thank you for all our participants for taking time out of the day, and really appreciate it very, very much, John. Great content, great opportunities, and thanks for offering the service at plancanvasapp.net, and also for taking people's calls or emails after the webinar. Just thank you very, very much, John, for doing this for us all. And thank you for all our participants for making time.
All right. Thank you. It was a pleasure. You all have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.